You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Here's the context. Montgomery, Alabama, 1957. Just 2 years before, in 1955, the Montgomery Bus Boycott started, as black people were tired of having to give up their seats to sit in the back of the bus, wanted opportunities for black bus drivers, and were just asking for equal rights and protection under the law. Think about Rosa Parks. After over a year-long boycott and a Supreme Court decision, the Montgomery bus system was finally integrated. Due to his leadership during the boycott, Dr. King, who was already a well-respected minister, rose to national attention as a leader in the civil rights movement. However, this came at a cost. In the beginning of 1956, a bomb exploded at the King residence in Montgomery, Alabama, where Coretta Scott King and their baby daughter Yolanda were present. Luckily, neither of them were hurt. And then in the beginning of 1957, 4 black churches, as well as other houses of prominent black leaders, were bombed by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Now fast forward to November 1957. You're sitting in the pew at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and the 28-year-old Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gets up to the pulpit, looks you in the face, and says the words, "Love your enemies?" I mean, it doesn't really make sense. We can't forget that before Dr. King was a civil rights icon, he was a Christian minister, and I believe it's really important to understand this to be able to fully comprehend the famous quotes that he's known for. Before he looked up to the champions of nonviolence like Gandhi, he followed and submitted to the teachings of Jesus. And while some may call Jesus impractical for suggesting to love our enemies, and while it may be completely contrary to human nature, Dr. King suggests this command is absolutely necessary for the survival of our civilization. He goes on to say, "Men must see that force begets force, hate begets hate, toughness begets toughness, and it's all a descending spiral, ultimately ending in destruction for all and everybody. Somebody must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate and the chain of evil in the universe, and you do that by love." This reflects the words of Jesus as men were coming to arrest him, and one of his disciples drew a sword to defend him, and Jesus said, "Stop, those who live by the sword die by the sword." And also, as Jesus was hanging on the cross, it's recorded that he prays, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Forgive? Forgive people who arrest you? Forgive people who beat you? Forgive people who are trying to kill you? And then this same philosophy is reflected by the Apostle Paul, one of the early church leaders who was also beaten multiple times and arrested multiple times. In some of his letters to the early Roman Christian church, Paul writes, "Don't take revenge. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink." And he continues by writing words that I think both Jesus and Dr. King would approve of. He writes, "Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." For the Christian church, for the true Christian church, this teaching of loving your enemies is deeply rooted in the grace, mercy, and forgiveness of God that is displayed by Jesus dying on the cross to forgive sins. And Dr. King took this approach because he believed it was a basic philosophy of the God he served. November 1957, that's when he gave this sermon, "Love Your Enemies." Dr. King still had, as we know, a little over a decade of life left to live, a decade full of arrests, beatings, hatred, death threats. As a man who followed after the example of Jesus Christ, he chose to lead with peace rather than the sword. He chose to overcome evil with good, and he chose to cut off the chain of hate and evil in this world. And his legacy still carries on. I want to end by sharing one story with you. September 2018. 26-year-old accountant Botham Jean was minding his own business in his apartment when an off-duty police officer, Amber Geiger, walks in and fatally shoots him. She later claimed that she thought it was her apartment and she thought that he was a burglar. This caught national attention because, unfortunately, it showed the all too familiar narrative of an unarmed black man being killed by a white police officer. And people were outraged and they demanded justice. The officer was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 10 years in prison, but people were still outraged and they believed that justice hadn't been served because the sentence was too light. However, the younger brother of Botham Jean, Brandt Jean, took a different approach. He took the stand and said to Amber Geiger, "I forgive you. I love you just like anybody else. I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you, and the best for you is to give your life to Christ." Someone murders your sibling and you say, "I forgive you?" I believe that many people admire Brandt Jean's compassion and his love, but I think that very few people truly understand where that stems from. Like Jesus, the Apostle Paul, Dr. King, I believe that Brandt Jean knew that in that moment, hatred would just bring about more hatred. At the very moment where a lot of us would want to seek revenge, he chose to forgive. And when it would have been so easy to hate, he chose to love. So Dr. King walks up to the pulpit of the modern day American Christian church, or just to modern day America, and looks you in the face, repeating the words of Jesus, "Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you." So I leave us with this question. Today, how will we cut off the chain of hate and evil in this world? I'll see you in the next video. Take care.